fear because it's all about fear, right? So it's not CSA is going to cause you to be cited. With all due respect, it could be our ignorance as industry practitioners doing the wrong things, doing the wrong controls in place. So thank you. I thought that was clear from regulators and industry. So I appreciate it. So again, we come to fear here, right? Why manufacturers fear a document like draft guidance that actually gives us a lot of freedom? And I know Daniel and Joanne, we had that discussion yesterday, but of course, I'm going to ask Mr. Vicente here to chime in. And of course, the second question, is it easier for manufacturer to just script the hell out of everything and call it a day, right? So again, it's a conversational piece here. I'd like you guys to provide your input. So Cisco.
Huh. So why do manufacturers fear the document? I think it's because of that aspect, right? It gives you a lot of freedom, and what they're fearing, we see this question a lot. They fear that something is going to go wrong or they're going to do something wrong. But end of the day, what the document is stating and the practices that are involved there oftentimes give the manufacturer a lot more confidence that the system's working. So the fear is, are they going to do something that, they're going to get dinged on by the regulator, right? That's, I think, the big driving aspect of things. And when you give a lot of freedom, I think there is this perception that now there's places for them to hang themselves, when in reality, what we're saying is, really the opposite. There's a lot that you're already doing. The freedom here isn't in, the ability to hang yourself. It's in saying, here's all the things I do or have already done that give me this level of confidence that this system will meet the intended use. Therefore, this is all I need to do extra because it's the piece that I still have, some risk about or some extra uncertainty about. So that's the intent, right? The idea here is not giving you freedom to hang yourself. And I think that's where the fear is coming from. It's giving you freedom to better articulate how you got to the decision you got to.
Thank you, Cisco. Daniel.
Oh, wait, is it easier for a manufacturer to script part 11? Is that part of the question too, or are we just talking the first one?
I think this is really a given one answer, but go ahead.
I was gonna say, it's easier depending on how you're doing it, what you're doing, and what you mean with the scripting. I leave that entirely up to you. Again, back to the freedom phase. What's the best approach and going to give you the best results in the fastest, most valuable time frame? But if you're doing it because it's just about generating documents, maybe look at that again and see if that's really bringing you the value you need.
Don't do it. Don't do it. Okay. Thank you, Cisco. Daniel, your input, please.
Sure. Manufacturers fearing the document. It's been my experience on both sides of the fence that industry wants regulations that are so clear, so defined, so well written as to leave no ambiguity or debate. And while on the one hand that makes some jobs easier, it also, in my experience on both sides, writes industry into very nasty corners. It makes things almost legally unescapable, especially if something goes wrong, especially if times change. I mean, Part 11, if a Part 11 was exact and specific, can you imagine the hassles and the outcomes? That's why they had to come up and say, oh, look, we got to move to enforcement discretion. Because it was moving so fast, they hit the gas right around 97. And then things just got out of hand. And look where we are. Nobody would have ever written Part 11 the way it's written today under the circumstances that we're in now. So we're trying to explain, hey, this is how we currently think. That's the purpose of a guide, currently think. And we're trying to give people the ability to say, look, by the time we actually write anything and get it through and approved, and we're the government, we recognize our own ability here. It takes a lot. And then to come out and say, by the time we actually come into and define on something specific, that's changed everything. And now there's a whole new universe behind where we're starting at. It's more appropriate to sit back, think about it, and put highly flexible but conceptual high principle guidelines around what the goal is. And I mentioned in my very first thing, it was about data integrity. That's what we're trying to protect. In addition to everything else, helping the business being able to defend itself. Is it easier? And I'm going to go this, and Joanne and I, we spoke about this a little bit. Is it easier for a manufacturer to script test? Sure. It's usually easier for a director who doesn't want to make a decision to go, you know what, I'm just going to script test it all. And that's fine. That's absolutely a decision. It's easier for them. It may not be easier on the budget. It may not be easier on the staff, but it's easier for them. So it really is who's making the decision about what that case is. And from a pure business case, having the freedom of flexibility to cut down and do a little bit upfront work and let that play out in the long term, it's been shown time and time again that saves more money and more effort and more energy, and actually has dividends. So, I mean, how you could answer that? Is it easier? It depends on who's making the decision. I'm sure that the line grunt that's the just newly hired test engineer that comes in on the system is going to be script testing every single password combination, isn't going to think it's the easiest decision in the world. So really does depend on how you approach the decision, but there are reasons, just macro business reasons, to be made for why it's a good idea to consider CSA.
Awesome. And I'm just going to add to my list of words here. We usually use the word critical thinking. I like the new one you use, currently thinking. This is beautiful. Thank you, sir. Joanne.
Yeah, so for me, I think the fear comes from the uncertainty. If there's the flexibility to analyze the situation, look at risks, look at what the system is supposed to do, that means that you have to have expertise. And if you take a consistent approach across the board and you always do the same thing, there's less risk that someone will ask questions, why is this different? But if you have the experience, if you have the knowledge to look at the situation and you do the activities that make sense to reduce the risk to ensure the compliance of the system, you can save a tremendous amount of time. So again, it's easier because you don't have to keep making decisions. But is it easier to maintain those scripts? Is it easier to execute those scripts? What ends up happening is we slow down the changes on our systems. We choose not to make changes that would benefit our organization, would benefit our processes, but we know that it takes time to test them, and so we're weighing those changes and the testing against the benefits of rolling out system changes. So that definitely uncertainty causes fear, and the historical response has been, we're just going to test everything because then we have the consistency, and anyone who comes in the door and asks us what we did, we just show them the test results. If we can document the risks and the approach we took, we can stand behind less testing, but it does take people to think about it and to explain it.
Totally agree. Thank you.
Yeah,
Go
just
ahead.
quickly add on to something there that Joanne said, because I think she hit something I think that people need to factor in, right? When she was talking about that risk piece, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like a lot of that risk people are worried about is that risk of not compliance, right? Because in time and time again, we've seen, even through the approach here, that oftentimes it's not really a safety concern, it's not a quality risk. On the contrary, we've seen actually people applying this when they start really thinking about it, get to some of those issues faster and better. But like you mentioned, it gives them a consistency, a defendable consistency, which to me speaks to that compliance piece. And then, like you said, slows down the ability to changes, which then does introduce that safety or security or product risk.
Oh, I'll even add on to that. So if the decision, the decision to script test everything, or just to go all in and test everything, there's an assumption on that too. And that assumption is that you're testing it right. If you screw up that testing, then your whole, I put all my eggs in the total script testing basket, but you did it incorrectly. Now all of a sudden you're left with giant holes in the basket, and you're going to get picked apart for that, which goes to Joanne's point about having expertise, which is absolutely vital. You definitely need it, but it also goes to the point of planning. It goes to that upfront preparation stage to say, what do we actually do? And you would do that whether you're script testing or not. Hopefully, you're not just going to throw spaghetti at the wall at this if you're afraid that you're going to get in trouble for doing it wrong. One would hope that you're thinking about that, critical or current or whatever thinking. So if you're going to do that, then let's just add this concept into that thought process right up at the front. Hey, but do we have to do everything? And now you have the ability to say, maybe I don't need to have this particular aspect of it done, but that's fine. You can justify that. And it should be pretty straightforward. Again, you are trying to hone down to what makes the biggest difference here. But yeah, the whole idea of fear is coming from that uncertainty, and it's coming from the idea that you don't know what you're aiming for. Well, if you think about it a lot, many of the requirements pretty straightforward. They're not hiding from you, and they're not diving away.
Awesome. So really, to summarize here, I mean, the agency is telling you basically, don't be afraid, do your job, critically think, right? It's not the document that we should be afraid of.